You know what really grinds my gears sometimes? This argument that has gone on for the past 5 years about why upgrade to a PS5 when PS4 got almost all the games cross-platform. Now, I tackled this question before here and there, but today I really want to go deep and expose everything that is wrong with this question. Like, there are so many points to cover here that I honestly don't even know where to start. Let's start with answering the question with another question. Why upgrade a 2060 Ti GPU to a 5060 Ti GPU? You want higher fidelity, higher resolutions, and higher FPS on your favorite games, right? It makes sense, right? So every time I heard this argument of what's the point in upgrading from PS4 to PS5, it broke my brain completely. Do you know what I did when I finally bought a PS5? I booted up God of War 2018, Spider-Man 2018, Uncharted 4, and Ghost of Tsushima. All these games are PS4 titles, right? Well, the second I booted these games up on my new PS5 and my new 4K HDR TV, I felt like I was living a lie all my life. These games ran at a buttery smooth 60 FPS, 4K resolution, and Spider-Man Remastered even added full ray tracing into the mix at 60 FPS. The jump in graphical power and zero load screens literally blew me away. And here is the crazy part for people that are still on PS4 and even PS4 Pro. The jump from HDD to SSD changed everything for me. Like, it changed so much that I remember when I was on PS4 Slim and I booted up Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It took me up to 5 minutes just to boot into the open world. And I literally had moments where I just turned off the TV before the game even had a chance to load up. By the end of the PS4 era, things were so bad that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the second you entered a cutscene, you were hit with a loading screen. Like, what are we doing here? You know what? Let's talk about Assassin's Creed Valhalla for a bit, because for me, this was the moment I realized PS4 is done. I asked myself, why did they even put this game on PS4 when every time I boot this game up, my console is crying for help? My first ever playthrough of this game was on PS4, and trust me, it was a nightmare. Sub 30 FPS. Textures were not loading in properly. Face textures were not loading in. Pop-ins everywhere in the environments. The foliage was pixelated as hell. I genuinely thought that Ubisoft released a broken, buggy mess of a game. But then I saw a YouTuber in 2021, I think, where he explained how much he hated AC Valhalla, and he said that he gave it another chance when he got his hands on a PS5. And he said it was a completely different experience. This was the moment I knew I needed a PS5. And PS5s were so hard to get your hands on in 2021 that it was ridiculous. And nope, I didn't care about building a PC as an alternative back then, because I looked at the benchmarks and it was clear, even back then, that a PS5 with a $500 MSRP was wiping the floor with any $1,000 PC rig. The shelves in stores were full of Xbox Series X consoles, but I also didn't care for those. There was no God of War, no Horizon Forbidden West, no Last of Us on Xbox. There weren't even any exclusives on Xbox. They were all already on PC too. So the waiting game was my best option. Fast forward to about 2022 and I finally got one. I finally got my hands on a PS5 and I still paid $700 for it. Yep, $700. No regrets. Now, before we get deeper into PS5, there are a few more games we need to mention here. The one game that was a blurry, unplayable mess for me on PS4 was Horizon Forbidden West. Yep, I bought that game for PS4, and the image quality and FPS the PS4 produced on screen literally hurt my eyes. I couldn't even get through the prologue. I told myself, nah, I'll play this game when I get a PS5. This is not the game that was advertised to me. I want to play the PS5 game that was presented to me in the trailers, not a Vaseline 25 FPS version of it. Same with God of War Ragnarok, which released in 2022. So the second I got myself a PS5, everything changed. I felt like I entered a new universe in gaming, and I could finally play those cross-platform PS5 games the way they were meant to be played. And even then, we had YouTubers that owned all the consoles and all the best PC rigs telling their audiences, what's the point in buying a PS5? You can play these games on PS4 anyway. And I was like, what in the hell are you talking about? Those cross-platform games that launched on both generations of consoles are literally a sin to be played on PS4. They're not the same game. Forbidden West, Ragnarok, even The Last of Us Part 2 were made for PS5. It was how they were meant to be played. Alright, next up, and this one barely even gets debated enough. The PS5 DualSense is a massive upgrade over the PS4 controller, and I don't mean nice vibration, cool marketing. I mean, this thing genuinely changed how games feel. The DualSense isn't just something you hold anymore, it's part of the game. The haptics alone make the old DualShock feel like a toy. In Astro's Playroom, which yeah, people wrote off as a tech demo, you instantly get it. You feel rain tapping the controller, sand crunching under your feet, metal scraping, ice sliding. It's not vibration, it's texture. Going back to a PS4 controller after that feels like muting half the experience. And adaptive triggers? Same deal. Pulling a bow, firing different guns, braking in racing games. There's resistance, there's tension. Your fingers actually have to work. It's the difference between clicking a mouse and pulling a real trigger. Once games lean into it properly, you don't want to turn it off. And when you do turn it off, you instantly feel what's missing. Now pair that with 3D audio, and this is where things get kind of wild. This isn't just better sound. This is directional awareness that actually changes how you play. With a good headset, you don't just hear enemies, you locate them. Above you, behind you, through walls, footsteps, echoes, distance, height. Horror games get scarier, shooters get more intense. Even open-world games feel more alive because the world finally sounds like it exists around you, not just in front of you. And then there's the SSD. This is the real silent killer feature. This is the thing that permanently broke the old generation. The jump from HDD to SSD didn't just make things faster, it changed what games are even allowed to do. Spider-Man 2 is the perfect example. You are flying across the city at absurd speeds, switching characters instantly. No loading screens, no tricks, no fake elevators, no squeezing through cracks to hide loading. The game just moves fast, constantly. It doesn't pause to catch its breath. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is even more brutal about it. You're literally jumping between entire worlds in real time. Different environments, different assets, different lighting, instantly. No loading, no fades, no cuts. That game does not exist on a PS4. It couldn't. Not even close. The hardware just wouldn't allow it. This is the part people miss when they say the games are cross-gen. Yeah, some of them are, but they are held back versions on PS4. The PS5 versions are what the developers actually wanted to ship. The SSD removes design limits that existed for decades. Level design, traversal, pacing, all of it changes. So when you stack it all together, DualSense, 3D audio, SSD, this isn't a small upgrade. This is a fundamental shift in how games feel, sound, and flow. And once you experience it properly, going back feels like downgrading your senses. Next up, let's talk about third-party games.
These are dark times. We have few allies. The odds are against us.
This is where the whole PS4 is fine argument completely falls apart. A lot of third-party games that launched on PS4 simply did not run well. And I'm not talking about nitpicks. I'm talking about games actively fighting the hardware every second you play them. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the perfect example. And honestly, it's borderline cruel that this game even exists on PS4. Jedi Survivor on PS4 is a mess. Not a little rough. Not needs a patch. A straight-up mess. Frame rate all over the place, constant stutter, long load times, muddy visuals, textures popping in late, environments loading while you're already standing in them. It feels like the game is constantly out of breath, like it's sprinting uphill with a backpack full of bricks. And the worst part? This isn't some fast twitch shooter where you can ignore performance. Jedi Survivor is built around timing, parries, precision combat, traversal. When the frame rate tanks, the entire combat system collapses. You miss parries, not because you're bad, but because the game hiccuped. Animations desync. Inputs feel delayed. It breaks the flow completely. Then, you boot it up on PS5, and suddenly the game makes sense. Combat feels tighter. Movement feels responsive. Worlds load properly. You're not waiting for the game to catch up with itself. It's the same game on paper, but the experience isn't even comparable. And this isn't just Jedi Survivor. We've seen this over and over. Third-party studios are clearly designing for current current gen first and then trying to scale things back for PS4. And scaling back doesn't mean lower resolution. It means cutting systems, downgrading AI, reducing density, killing performance just to make it boot. PS4 versions at this point feel like emergency ports. Like, we have to ship it here too. But please don't look too closely. The hardware is tapped out. There's no headroom left. Every new third-party game pushes it past its limit. So when people say, well, it runs on PS4, yeah, technically. In the same way a car with 3 wheels technically drives. But you wouldn't want to take it on the highway. That's the reality. Third-party games expose the gap harder than anything else. And Jedi Survivor on PS4 isn't proof that PS4 still holds up. It's proof that it's time to move on.
I'm Mark Cerny, lead system architect of PlayStation 5, and I'm here to talk about what we made and how we made it.
So this all comes from a June 2024 GamesIndustry.biz interview where Mark Cerny directly addressed the whole PC versus console price debate. And he wasn't vague about it either. He straight up said that when Sony builds a console, they are not trying to make a low-cost PC. That line matters because it frames the entire argument. This was very clearly a response to that Linus Tech Tips video from earlier in 2024 titled, "It's Time to Kill the PS5. The goal of that video was simple: prove that several years into the PS5's life, you could finally build a PC around $500 that could match or outperform it. To hit that $500 price, LTT had to compromise. Intel Arc 770 graphics card, which at the time was still dealing with driver instability. Used parts too. Secondhand motherboard, secondhand case. That wasn't optional either. Linus openly said using used components was the only way to make the numbers work. And sure, in certain tests, like Doom Eternal, the PC could match or beat the PS5 in raw frame rate. But that was basically the best case scenario. Outside of that, the experience was rougher. Driver quirks, stability issues, extra setup, not the kind of thing you'd ever call plug and play. Even Linus admitted that while the hardware gap had narrowed, the overall experience still wasn't a clean win for PC at that price point. This is where Cerny's response gets interesting, because he didn't argue specs at all. He didn't care about frame rates. He went straight to the economics and the fairness of the comparison. His argument was brutally simple. If you need to use secondhand parts to match the price of a brand new PS5, then the comparison is already flawed. And if used parts are allowed on the PC side, then you also have to allow a used PS5 in the comparison. And once you do that, everything breaks, because you can find used PS5s for $300-something. So now the PC isn't competing with a $500 console anymore. It's competing with a $300 one. And at that price, the PC loses the value argument again. That was Cerny's core rebuttal. No drama, just logic. From there, he zoomed out and explained Sony's actual philosophy. Consoles are not meant to be modular general-purpose machines. They're purpose-built systems designed to be efficient as hell. And that's where raw spec comparisons fall apart. PCs are chained to standards. Decades of Windows support, infinite hardware combinations, legacy compatibility. Consoles don't have that baggage. Sony can break standards when it makes sense. That's how the PS5 SSD happened. That custom I/O pipeline wasn't just about speed numbers. It was about removing bottlenecks across the entire system. And the industry response proves the point. Direct storage didn't magically appear on PC because someone felt generous. It happened because consoles forced the issue. Cerny also brought up something most players never think about: time to triangle. Basically, how long it takes developers to get anything meaningful on screen. Back in the PS3 era, studios spent 6 to 12 months just figuring out how to talk to the hardware, writing engines, wrestling memory, fighting the architecture. On PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, that dropped to roughly 1 to 2 months. That's massive. Less time fighting hardware means more time making games, better tools, faster iteration, fewer compromises. That's the whole idea of making hardware invisible. If developers aren't thinking about the box, they can think about design, pacing, visuals, and performance instead. Same story with audio. Tempest 3D audio isn't just a software feature, it's dedicated hardware. Sony decided audio mattered enough to build a specialized unit for it. On a budget PC, audio is just another task shoved onto the CPU, and hope for the best. So no, this wasn't some personal beef between Linus and Cerny. It was two different philosophies talking past each other. Linus's argument is about flexibility. flexibility, freedom, and long-term value. PC gaming gives you cheaper games, more options, more control. Cerny's argument is about efficiency and integration. You get a machine where every component is designed to work together, predictable performance, minimal friction, and a price point that stays competitive without relying on used parts. That's the real takeaway. Consoles aren't weaker PCs. They're focused machines built around experience. And the moment you need secondhand PC parts just to call something a PS5 killer, the argument kind of proves Sony's point for them. Once you get past the debate angle, Cerny starts talking like a designer who's been doing this forever. Not marketing, not PR, just how he actually thinks about hardware. One of the first things he brings up is this metric he uses called time to triangle, and it's exactly what it sounds like. How long does it take a developer, once they get the dev kit, to put a basic triangle on the screen? Not a game, not a level, just something rendering properly. And the history here says a lot. On PS1, it was about a month, pretty straightforward hardware. Then PS3 happened, and everything went sideways. That number ballooned to 6 to 12 months. And that wasn't because developers were lazy. It was the cell processor. Powerful, sure, but insanely complex. Studios were basically fighting the hardware for half a year before they could even get comfortable. With PS4 and PS5, he brought that back down to 1 to 2 months. That's intentional. And it ties directly into another criticism he addresses, which is this idea that games taking 4 to 6 years to make must mean the hardware's too complicated again. Cerny's response is basically, no, not anymore. The hardware isn't the bottleneck now. It's a choice. Developers are choosing to build massive, asset-heavy worlds with insane detail. That time sink is about ambition, not architecture. Then he talks about the things that actually surprised him this generation, which is rare to hear from someone who literally designed the box. First one, ray tracing. He fully expected it to be a late generation thing, something devs would slowly figure out years down the line, like what happened in past generations. Instead, launch titles were already using it. Not perfectly, not everywhere, but it was there immediately. That caught him off guard. The bigger surprise, though, was frame rate. He assumed the industry would do what it always does. Push visuals harder and settle back into 30 frames per second. That's how it's gone every generation. But this time, players pushed back hard. Performance modes became almost mandatory. 60 FPS stopped being a bonus and turned into an expectation. And that wasn't driven by marketing or platform holders. That was players saying, we'd rather have smooth than sharp. And Cerny clearly didn't expect that shift to happen so fast. He also went deeper into why PS5 games look so different when they come to PC, especially in terms of minimum specs. People always notice that PC ports suddenly need way more CPU and RAM than expected. And his explanation is simple. The PC is brute forcing things the PS5 does with dedicated hardware. On PS5, streaming data, handling audio, and moving assets around the system is offloaded to custom units. When you move that game to PC, those units don't exist, so the CPU has to pick up the slack. That's why minimum specs jump. It's not bad optimization, it's missing bespoke hardware. Then there's the personal stuff, which honestly makes him more interesting than most execs in this space. At 60 years old, he's still actively gaming. He casually mentions platinuming Neon White, which is not an easy game. That's a reflex-heavy, speedrunning nightmare if you're even slightly off your game. And he admits he wasn't sure he still had it in him. He compared it to his old arcade days. But to him, this matters. You can't design hardware for gamers if you don't understand what modern games demand from the player, the stamina, the precision, the repetition. That mindset explains a lot about why PlayStation hardware feels the way it does. Toward the end, he gets reflective. 40+ years in the industry does that. He talks about missing the era where one person could visibly impact a game. And he gives this perfect example from Crash Bandicoot 2. If you're running down a path and there's an apple sitting there, there's a good chance he personally placed it. That kind of granular authorship just doesn't exist at scale anymore. And when he talks about retirement, he basically shrugs it off. His role model is Clint Eastwood, not because of movies, but because Eastwood was still directing in his 90s. Cerny clearly sees himself the same way. Still designing, still iterating, still involved. So yeah, outside of the debates and headlines, the interview paints a picture of someone who's less interested in winning arguments and more interested in making hardware disappear so games can shine.